There's a new Inspector General report out about the security failures surrounding the January 6th Capitol riot, and boy, it is scathing and it is outrageous. Everything from intelligence failures, so they had ample evidence that protesters may be targeting the U.S. Capitol directly and didn't really act on that evidence. They were directed to not use some of their most potent and aggressive crowd control tactics. Obviously, many people pointed out, very different than the response to the Black Lives Matter protesters. But even things like their riot shields, some of them hadn't been stored properly, so they shattered when they were used. Others of them were on a bus that was locked, so they couldn't even get to them. So look, we've been saying the whole time, and this is why I think this is so incredibly important, like where do we go through from here? Those security failures have been used to justify a massive national security state expansion, normalizing militarized streets in D.C., this permanent fencing around the Capitol, the idea, a new domestic terror law, all these things have been justified based on these failures. What we've basically been saying is, look, if you had a few more officers on the ground, a few hundred more officers, none of this ultimately would have come to pass. This says it's even more than that. If those officers that were there just didn't have defective equipment, then none of this may have ultimately unfolded. So it really is outrageous. And I think it also raises the question, where did that directive come from to basically stand down?
That is my big question here. So according to this watchdog report, which is that department leaders overlooked key intelligence in the run-up to that riot, including a warning that, quote, Congress itself was the target. Now, they blame department leaders, again, for both ignoring the intelligence, so there was ample intelligence, even though 2 days later, on January 3rd, they said that they did not see, and none of the intelligence we've received predicted what actually occurred, which was Stephen Sund. He's a former Capitol Police chief. He told the Senate. So he basically portrayed it as them getting caught off guard. That's just not the case. The real question in my mind is this, which is that why did they order Special Crowd Control Unit not to use its most powerful non-lethal weapons? So in this, they write, quote, operating at a decreased level of readiness as a result of lack of standards for equipment, and they fostered a culture that decreased operational readiness, and it compounded when department leadership directed the unit not to use some of its most powerful crowd controls, such as stun grenades. Rank-and-file officers later said they believed they would have helped fight the crowds that eventually overtook them and broke into the building. Heavier, less lethal weapons were not used that day because of orders from leadership. So again, is the question that leadership made this decision autonomously and therefore idiotically and foolishly? Or is the question, were they ordered to by whomever is in charge of security at the Capitol? And this isn't a Trump thing. This is like, it could be Nancy Pelosi, it could be Tim Ryan, it could be Mitch McConnell, it could be whomever is in charge of the security situation, the security subcommittee or whatever for the United States Senate. So it is possible, though it does not indicate anywhere here, that political leaders pressured department leaders in order to make that. And I think that's where the ultimate question lies.
That's right. And there are just outrageous failures on every level to get. It's like Keystone Cop stuff. Munitions that were stocked in the police armory were beyond their expiration date. The agency had repeatedly failed to adequately complete their audits to notice that the munitions were beyond their expiration date. The riot shields shattering, being locked inside of a bus so you can't even get to them. It's absolutely insane. And they also say within the agency, the Civil Disturbance Unit, which is, of course, what was used to respond to these riots, has a reputation as an undesired assignment that fostered a culture that decreased operational readiness. So basically, what does that mean? People didn't want to be in this unit. So this was like the C team in a lot of cases that was responding because of this culture that was ultimately created of like, this is a crappy assignment. And so the people who have influence and are maybe like considered the top, they're not the ones that got put on to that team. The other thing here is some of the specifics around the intelligence. First of all, anyone with a brain knew that that day was going to be fraught. I mean, Trump had said out loud, it's going to be wild. Clearly, there was a lot of agitation, a lot of upset about the election results. There was a lot of talk about what Congress was doing that day and certifying those results using the Electoral College. And so they talk about some of the specifics here of people were sharing maps of the Capitol complex. People were saying, come and be ready to die because this is like the last stand for our country. All of this was out there and was known, and they basically just chose not to act on it.
No, they didn't, and I think that that's the biggest problem you can see. And we even identified this in the beginning. We had Ken Klippenstein on the show talking about the intelligence briefings that the Department of Homeland Security had. And you have 100 more cops or the same cops with the ability in order to do what they had to do that day, and the entire thing looks different. We didn't need thousands of National Guardsmen, or we don't need new domestic terror laws or new Department of Homeland Security. They had everything that they needed.
Absolutely.
It's just like the classic story of they want to cover up their own incompetence. And like my ultimate question is, were any political leaders involved in making this case? Republican or Democrat? If it was Trump, same thing.
They not only want to cover up their incompetence, they want to use that incompetence for an expansion of power.
Yeah.
Like, think about that. Like, we did such a bad job that you need to give us more power.
We need more expired weapons in our armor.
Right, that's exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. That's the case that's being made here. So I think that's why this report is so incredibly significant, because it really lays bare the fact that this all could have been avoided. There were more than enough resources if just the basic protocols and common sense and preparation had been followed.
Yeah, that's right.
More Rising for you after this.